Buenos dias. I don't know what Perry said, but hopefully they were good things. So let's kind of get started. I have to tell you, I want to first apologize that I can't speak Spanish. And second, tell you that it's truly an honor and a privilege to be able to speak in Spain. I've been here once before, but just to see the Grand Prix, so I didn't really get to see much of the country, and it's really beautiful. And the food's been great, but that's probably true in most of Europe. Kind of as an exercise, what I'd like you to think about is your frame of mind at this particular moment. You don't know anything about me, really. You don't know who I am, but I hope that most of you have come to this with a very open mind to try to learn something. And we'll get back to that in some of the other lectures. That's really an important leadership characteristic. It's a really important way to manage your people, to be able to approach every problem, every meeting, every discussion as if it was new. Because when you don't, and I'm assuming that there may be some people here that are coming to see if I'm going to say something wrong or not listen to me, but I think most of you are looking for advice or clues or hints about some things that we've done that have helped us. And that's just human nature. And I think what you're going to hear at all three of my talks is everything relates to people. And I think you'll hear in some of your meetings tomorrow some more of that. And there are things, certainly that Perry does, that are really important for a company to be healthy. The basic financial fundamentals, how you practice those efficiencies. But at the end of the day, it's still about people, because if the people aren't performing to their best in your business, none of those other things really matter. So management, leadership, and people would really be the framework for what we're talking about today. So what I want to start with, today is not something you need to take notes with, as soon as I can get into this. When we started our practice, it was a long time ago, and we certainly had a very good environment because nobody's really doing anything new or different in veterinary medicine. So to some degree we had a lot of luck. But I can tell you over the last 26 years we've had a lot of really bad luck. I think what's important about bad luck and good luck, people who are successful aren't necessarily people who've had more good luck. Or people who have failed, but are not necessarily who've had a lot of bad luck. I think over the years I've come to realize that people who become successful know what to do with good luck and know what to do with bad luck. Because we all get a share of both of those things. And there's certainly some things that we can't control, like the economy, government taxes, government regulations. We have to deal with that. We were in a really serious recession. Well, one of the things is you first come out of school, you really are somewhat ignorant to all the complexities of running a business. And those are probably the good days because you don't worry about them. So when we opened our business, it was a really bad recession in the United States back in the early, mid-'80s. The fortunate thing is we didn't understand what that meant. We didn't know about it. There wasn't financial channels telling us every day the economy's bad. So we made business decisions unrelated to worrying about that bad economy. And I'm only bringing this up because I think there's a lot of similarities right now between our two countries and our professions. The one obvious one is the economy, and for the first time the international economy has also impacted our national economies, and that's new for our profession, at least in America. But with the things we're going to talk about over the next couple of lectures, this is the best opportunity to really reevaluate your business and not fall into the trap of making decisions out of fear and concern and frustration. This is a time to be actually very optimistic. This is a time because those practices, at least in the U.S., who stayed the course, made decisions that they would have made in a better economy, are the ones that are surviving and the ones that will accelerate if, and I hope, the economies turn around. The other thing we'll probably talk a lot about is human nature. I've been to several countries, and I think cultures can be very different. But when you really talk to people, human nature or problems, even in our professions, are very similar. And good leaders or good business owners have to do two things with that. Number one, understand that it exists. You're not going to change human nature. And number two, can't fall victim of human nature. You have to think above and beyond that. And we'll get into that in more details. But here's the problem with all of us as veterinarians. And if I had to tell you my biggest issue in 27 years, it's working with doctors. And I think the bigger your practice gets, that becomes more apparent. And it's not for a bad reason. As doctors, we go through training, and we're all very competent at that, but our job is to look for the one negative thing, the one thing that's wrong in our patient. That's what we're trained to do. And when it comes to doing medicine, that's a great talent. When we use that same method of thinking to run our businesses, it's disastrous. When we have meetings, depending on how they're run, a doctor mentality, again, this is not a criticism, it's just a talent. It's kind of like racing. Managers are kind of the people that drive the car. That doesn't make sense, but it is. So the manager kind of has a feel for the whole car, knows what's going on. The mechanic is the detail person. Fixes things, finds things wrong. Certainly you would never expect the mechanic to drive a car or the driver to fix the car. So your management thought process is that driver who doesn't worry about what's wrong with something. Like you came to this meeting, you look at your business, and you kind of try to take a look from the outside and say, what makes sense? Not necessarily what makes money, but what makes sense. Motivation is a very important thing. When we all came out of school, I'm assuming all of you were passionate about your careers. I mean, I certainly was. And passion and motivation go very well together. And normally when I ask the question to I will ask, how many in this audience are practice owners? I thought there would be more. Okay. So when I lecture back home, especially when I speak to students, I ask them a question. I ask them, what are the most important reasons or the top reasons you chose to be a hospital owner? And the two answers that I get almost all the time. So I want to make money. That doesn't happen anymore. And two, I want to be in control. Or I want to be the person who makes the decisions, makes the plans. And I would tell you those are the two worst reasons to be in a leadership role. It's the wrong motivation. You know, if two of us in this room were given the same amount of money to invest, had the exact same business, everything was identical. Location, facility, but our motivations were different. One person would succeed, one person would not. And so what does that look like? The person who is motivated by seeing their team, their staff, be successful, the person who's motivated by trying to deliver the best service to their client, not just medicine, may not make money quickly, but long-term will still be there 10, 15, 25 years. The person who's motivated by control and making money will not make the right decisions in the long run. In the first year or two, that person may make more revenues, but people are smart. There are only certain things that we'll talk about in the next couple of lectures that have a lasting appeal to your client rather than a short-term appeal to your client. You know, it's, as a group, veterinarians are some of the nicest people I know. As a profession, they're probably some of the most compassionate people I know. But when it comes to business decisions, they seem to forget those two things. Your staff is so critical to your success, yet we choose as business owners, and I did as well. I thought that I was the one with the answers, I was going to make things work well, and what I did was neglected to realize that there are great imaginations, great ideas, and great drive for your company because of your employees. So we're going to move into a discussion today because that only happens and it starts in one place. And I truly believe this from experience. Like everything, your parents tell you things, you don't listen to them until you're old enough to realize they were right. But everything in your company is a result of you, the person in charge. Not bad employees. I constantly hear people, you know, I can't get things done. My employees, the doctors. It all starts with you. And so what I think I like to try to do in the three talks is talk about what we have to do to be successful, why that's important, and then talk about how that translates to our staff and how that even translates to how we market. Now, a little bit of history, at least in the U.S. in veterinary medicine, because I think that's important to the mistakes we made and what we've learned, or hopefully learned. When I graduated, it was a pretty simple profession. Even as a specialist, there wasn't a lot of stuff. There wasn't a lot of technology. So, most of the specialists at the time were in veterinary schools. Almost 90% of the specialists were in veterinary schools. And when I left to go into private practice, my hospital was, I believe, 75 square meters, about 800 square feet. And I had a stethoscope, a little reflex hammer, and a little machine to do hematocrits, blood concentration. That's it. Our clients had no expectations back then. Prices were low. We didn't care. We were happy. And back then, we just wanted that job. That was the good days. And then, somebody decided that we were more important. I don't know who that is. But this big campaign started. Veterinarians are important. Your animal's important. The animal bond is important. And then we had these, how do I say this? An influx of financial advisors come in. Told us a lot of great stuff, but all we heard, raise your prices. So at the same time, from the late 80s to, I probably would say, 2007, 2006, you couldn't fail in veterinary medicine in America. You opened up a door, and the money just came in. What no one paid attention to is revenues were raising because of price increases, not volume of customers. Matter of fact, we asked the question, so how things, oh great, revenues are up 25%. And we asked, well, how's volume? Well, I don't know. So human nature says, if you, for example, if you go out today and buy a car for, I'm making this up, for 15,000 euros, you have certain expectations of that car and the service. If you then went out and bought a car for 250,000 euros, I think your expectations and the service you would get, you'd expect more. Yes? I would think so. Well, that's what's happened in the U.S. with veterinary medicine. And I bring this up because our clients' expectations are massive. Because we have gotten to a point, my opinion, by the way, we are charging too much. We've made it very complicated to own a dog or a cat. And I think we may have pushed the envelope a little bit too far. For the last, and I might be correcting this a little bit, but 8 to 9, maybe 10 years, decreased national office visits. And more recently, decreased pet ownership in the last 2 years in America. And I've been on panel discussions. We would do surveys and get all this information. But for me, the bottom line is, it's more complicated to own a pet because of us. And it's way more expensive. And we have to be concerned about that. So most of what I'm going to address is really about how do we build volume? How do we build a client base? And I think that's important. And I think it's also important to realize that no longer, and I've spoken to people in South America, I've spoken to people here, I've spoken to people in America, and including myself when I started. I made all these mistakes. I wasn't a smart person. I happen to have a dad who was a very common sense person who taught me some really neat things. It's not about the medicine. And when I tell you, we just got this new blood analyzer, we just got this new x-ray, digital x-ray, we got this. And I would ask, so, who answers your phone? Oh, people up front. That is the most important position in your hospital. Today. When I came out of school, not important. Every single event that happens in your building, outside of the medicine you do, is how you're being judged right now. Steve Jobs, Apple Computers, I'm sure you all know who that is. If you read his book, it really turns out that the business people were more the generators of success because Steve Jobs was that typical veterinarian. Meaning that, hey, I have a great product here, you got to buy it. I'm not going to advertise. Bill Gates, on the other hand, I'm advertising. We can't rely on our medical skills anymore for success. And if you look at the book, and I wish I had remembered the page, there's a page where their business philosophy for Apple Computers, one of the biggest companies in the world, is one page. And there's 3 points to it. None of them talk about computers. And 2 apply, well, 3 apply, but for today, the 2 that I find really interesting is the number 1 principle of Apple Computers. The number 1 principle that should be the principle in every hospital in this country. We are going to treat our customers better than our competitors. It didn't say make better computers. It said we're going to treat our customers better than our competitors. The other principle, something Steve Jobs didn't recognize in his younger years, is that human nature does matter. I don't care how philosophical you are, what your political background is, how intellectual you think you are, we all are victims of human nature. We do judge a book by its cover. And I'm sure there's people sitting here today that say, no, I don't do that, but we do. And then sometimes we have to realize that's not all there is. But Apple said we do have to recognize that. So it was important to Apple that the client service, the appearance of the computers, those things were important. This is one of those things, when you go back to motivation, that's one of those things that gets your clients right away, but yes, it does not retain your clients. And what happens a lot in America, we spend a lot of time, how do we get clients into the door with all this gimmicky stuff and wellness plans and all that, but we fall short because we forget about making the experience while they're there incredible. So as veterinarians, when we try to come up with solutions to this, we sometimes overanalyze. You'll be told to... So, for example, we had never... Well, let me back up. When we built this building, it was the first time anybody paid attention to us, because we weren't out there. We didn't advertise. I didn't know who anybody was in the profession. So when people started coming, so so-and-so from somewhere, I said, I don't know them. I don't know them either. I didn't know my competitors. Because I don't need to know what my competitors are doing. Even with what little I've told you today, you must realize the only thing I need to know is what does my customer want? And I'm going to trust my competitor to know that better than me. I certainly don't know that about the people in Spain, but you do. If you can remember about that thought process when I said when you first came into this room, open, we had the possibility of any kind of relationship because we didn't know each other. So it could go bad, it could go well. But at that moment, you were open to hear what I had to say. Now after this lecture, you may not come back for the next one, but the point is that frame of mind is important to have all the time because when you don't have that, when you're analytical, and this is the doctor part that gets in the way. And I was the same way, and it takes a long time to break that habit. That doctor hat, the doctor hat that we wear is so detrimental to ideas. That doctor hat will kill every great idea that your company comes up with. Similarly, the management hat would kill every patient you tried to deal with. So they're both important talents. Don't get me wrong about this. I'm not saying one's better, one's worse, but it is what it is. So when you use that logic to decide what your clients want, you will tend to overanalyze. You need to walk out of the picture, not be a doctor, and think about your experiences. So I'll tell you something very scary. And I won't ask you to answer the questions, I'll tell you what the answers typically are. I'll typically ask an audience. This is human nature. Human nature lesson number 1. This is an important one. I'll ask an audience, how many have been out to dinner in a restaurant in their lifetime? Well, you can imagine everybody raises their hand. Second question is, how many of you had at least one bad experience with the food or the service? Typically, everybody raises their hand. The next question is, how many of you went to the owner of the establishment and nicely said, hey, this happened, X, Y, Z. Typically, 5% of the people raise their hand. You know what the significance of that is? You had many clients never come back and you didn't even know it. That's human nature. And you know what's even worse? We take our clients who complain and we kind of don't want to listen. But in fact, that client is just representing an irrational response to something you've done wrong. That client is giving you a clue of something you need to be better at. Because the rational client didn't like it either, but they just didn't come back. Now, as a business owner, you would say to yourself in the restaurant, because you're a business owner, I'll come back again because everybody has a bad day. But the majority of people are not business owners. And you may have found in your own experience that when you dealt with somebody who's a business owner, they'll actually tell you, they won't leave you and say, hey, Doc, this wasn't right. And you say, okay, we'll try to fix that. There's a woman who was appointed CEO of Xerox Computers, and I had the luck to hear her speak. And I think she had some very good points that relate to our profession. By the way, we now have another similarity that we never had before with other countries is that we are now overpopulating ourselves with not only general practitioners but also specialists. And that's going to be a real problem. It's a problem today. It's going to be a really serious problem in 5 or 6 years. The exciting part for her, she was made CEO of the company. The not exciting part is a couple months before it's going bankrupt. But what she did is what I spoke to you about in the beginning of this conference. She didn't panic. They did rational things. They made certain cuts. But what she said, against all recommendations from her financial people, I am not cutting research and development. Because she was going to be ready for when times were better. Because if you don't do that, and times get better, you're behind everybody else. And I was going to play an excerpt from her, but in my country I found that I can't do that without permission, so I apologize. But what she said was, and if I paraphrase, and you replace the word technology with veterinary medicine, she said the same thing. We spend too much time on technology. not enough time on addressing and solving people's problems. So she moved her company in a direction of how do we solve problems. So if you can take yourself away from your business and look inside out and say, how many times do I make another problem for my client? When a client calls and doesn't get anybody to answer the phone, when a client is called and told you need to call back, sounds okay to you because you work there, but if you are not working there, that's a problem. You've given a very busy woman with kids or her husband or whoever another task to do in a very busy day. You know, what no one predicted is everybody predicted that with technology we would have more time to spend. But in fact, at least in my country, it seems like there's less free time. That's one of the things we have to respect from our clients, and we've not done a good job of that. What we've done is we made our clients come to the practice more, we made them do more things, more vaccines, more this, more that. We have to move in the direction of solving our clients' problems, making things very easy. It's pretty amazing because we all go to different stores. We buy things, we go to restaurants, we go to shows, and we judge those places by what we know. Why do you think it's any different for our customers? We keep telling ourselves we're veterinarians, but actually we're a client service business. No different than Apple computers. As a matter of fact, in the U.S., what I tell veterinarians I talk to is that our competition is not the other veterinarian. I mean, to some degree it is, especially when they're overcrowded. But our competition is Apple Computer. Our competition is Mercedes-Benz. Our competition is Audi. And I say that because those industries, 50 years ago, car dealerships were a nightmare, terrible places to go to. But as more choices happened, right? You know, 50 years ago in America, we had 5 companies, 3 companies to choose from. Now there's tons of companies. And so those companies who were up front with service did much better. We're there. We're at that place. People have choices. And that's where, when we talk about marketing for the future comes in, is people have lots of choices. As a matter of fact, to give you an example of how I use the word managers loosely, but give you an example about how managers and doctors think very differently. In the U.S. right now, I have a really unfair advantage in that I have really incredible people who work for us. I mean, I'm really not needed anymore. And so when we try to make decisions, we actually try to get information rather than guessing. So, for example, we know for a fact that when we first opened our business, there wasn't many other specialists around. Now they're all over the place. There are literally a dime a dozen. So when our customers call, what we know is if we do not resolve their issue on that phone call, they're not calling back. These are new customers. Old customers will do the same thing if you do enough to them. They're just going to call the next person down the street. You know, in New Jersey alone, there's probably 15 oncologists. There's 6 neurologists in New Jersey. New Jersey's little. A lot of people, but little. So we know that at a certain given point in time, we look at how long somebody has to wait for an appointment, and that's how we determine whether or not we want to add another doctor to that service. A doctor will come when I say that in the same department because they don't want another doctor in their department. They'll say, well, look, there's an opening on Tuesday, there's an opening on Wednesday. We don't need another doctor. As you're going to hear later today, availability is king. Availability is the most important thing. It's not something that keeps your customers, but it gets them in the door. And so, if I work 4 days a week, 15 hours a day, I'm missing all those customers that can only, and my day off is Wednesday. So that's a pretty common day off in the U.S. There's a whole group of people that cannot come in or can only come in on Wednesday. it's more important to be open 7 days. I'm not saying you should do that, or I guess I am saying you should do that. You don't have to. But you'd be more successful having fewer hours open 7 days a week than you would having lots of hours for 4 days a week. Because it's not so much the hours of the day, it's the days of the week that are important to your customers. I mean, I can't tell you how many frustrated people near where a lot of our restaurants where I live close on Monday. There's a lot of people that don't go to those restaurants just because they can't go there on Monday. So you can't think about what you want for your business. You can't have control. The minute you chose to run a business, you've given up your right to make those decisions for yourself. Previous point, wanting to be in control is not a good reason to run a business. Your whole focus should be outside the door. Your whole world should be determined by the client, not your staff. So, as we go forward, I think leadership is an important thing. And it's really funny because when you talk about leadership and everybody has their lists and you have this trait and that trait, they're really traits that everybody should have. I mean, think about it. Honesty, good listener, perseverance, resilient. Resilient meaning when you're a leader, people are just out there to criticize. We all need those attributes. And I know that I've been told that there are some doctors here today that are not business owners, but they're associates. Well, you know what? You're still leaders. Because you have staff that work for you. And so, no matter what I tell you today, and what you're going to hear today, you're going to say, oh yeah, sure, that makes sense. I hear that all the time. People say, yeah, I know that. But knowing it's not enough. You got to do it. But you have to do it from here. You can't go back and do something somebody told you because you were told to do. You have to believe in it. And nothing works unless you believe in it and you trust everybody who works for you. There's a movie that I sometimes ask people to watch. And it's really about two things I don't like. It's about football and about racism. I mean, two things But there's some really great lines in that movie. The name of the movie is Remember the Titans. And the line is, attitude reflects leadership. So when you walk around criticizing your hospital and the things that are wrong, you better look to yourself first, because you're the cause of it. Even a person who's not performing well, you are probably a cause of that. And we're going to talk about that. I'm not sure what order the lectures are in. But to give you some background on what I think is important in being successful, I started a business because I got fired from my first job. And so there goes the bad luck. And what do you do with the bad luck? And so I opened a business. When my partner and I opened the business, we had very simple goals. And not because we knew anything about business, it's kind of what we wanted, which is a contradiction to what I just told you. But it turns out what we wanted were good things. We wanted work to be interesting. So we decided a lot of things we decide to do would be so we don't lose interest in our work. Because when you lose interest in your work, you don't do a good job. The second thing was we were going to be totally available to our clients. Now you have to remember, this is late 80s. Not many people had emergency services back then. And if they did, there was really nobody in the building. You got an answering machine and you meet somebody and who wants to get out of bed and drive them to work. And so way back then, we staffed our hospital 24 hours a day. Without knowing it, that worked for us because we did a pretty good job with our clients on a personal level. And if you had met my partner, who's much better at that than I am, people kind of like us. But people are funny. We still lost. We bought an old hospital that was not doing well, and we lost 30% of the clientele in the first month. Human nature. We don't want to go to a new doctor, so we're going somewhere else to see a new doctor. But that's human nature. And, we were frustrated, but I think back now, we go, okay, that's human nature, we'll deal with it, we'll plan around it. And because of my experience, my dad was a person who taught by example. So he never sat down and gave me a lecture, and he had a small business. And he was actually very excited I would take his business over because we had this big talk because he was hoping I would. And I said, gee, if I did that, then I can't ever say I did what you did, which was build a business from scratch. And he was actually, that made him, I appreciate this, it made him rather proud, and so he was good with that. But one of his most important things that he taught me by his actions was how important his employees were. He wasn't an educated man. He didn't finish high school. But he knew the value of relationships. And that's the only, that's not the only reason, but it's probably the most important reason why he was successful. And Tom and I focused on that because it came natural to us. And that's something I can't teach. There's a gentleman who also spoke at the same conference as the woman from Xerox, and he talked about leadership. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about it too. But what he discovered, it doesn't mean anything. Because he looked at one of the fastest, most successful businesses in the U.S. that went from nowhere to number 10 in the most recognized brands in the U.S. It was a hotel chain, low-cost hotel chain. So he picked the top 5 hotel successes and talked to those leaders, those managers. Now, one of them was the same in what they used. And that's not a surprise, but what's important to recognize, what he recognized, if all 3 of us were up here, the top 3 of the 5, which is what he did, if he were to ask me to do the same type of leadership that this person did, who was very successful, I would fail. Because we all have our own style. Leadership comes from somewhere inside. It doesn't come from me telling you or from you reading a book. You have to get to a place in your head where you kind of you stand back from all the stuff that keeps you up at night, and I know that does if you're a business owner, and forget about it. And say, how do I be a better leader for my staff, not how do I tell my staff what to do. Now, in all honesty, you don't have to raise your hand, but how many people run their businesses that way? The first thing is, I have to do this, I have to do that. When you transition into, how do we do this? That's when you start becoming a better company. And even if you don't grow a lot, it'd be a much happier place to work. And that has value too. That has quality of life value. Because a lot of things we're going to talk about today is making the environment happy. Because at the end of the day, your staff see more time with your clients than you do as a doctor. So as we grew, we made tons of mistakes. Tons of mistakes. The 3 most important things I would tell you I wish I had done sooner is one, recognize human nature and understand what that meant to everyone else and what it meant to me as a leader. Number 2, I would recognize much faster that having some type of management structure was absolutely necessary for growth. And the biggest mistake I see with that is, we get all these gurus, really smart people who tell us we need to do this, so we hire a manager, and instead of trying to find the exact right person, we put someone who's a manager in place and then we tell them what to do. And they go, well, that didn't work, and we don't know why. Well, because you made it fail. You get the right person and you just let them go. You do maybe some guidance. What a manager should get from you is, what's your vision? What do you want? How can I help you get there? Not you going back to your doctor hat, well, don't do this because this could be a problem. I spoke to somebody who said, well, we tried that once, it didn't work, so we're not going to do it again. So that's the next important point. Know the difference between what learning from experience means. This is important. At least it was important for me. Too many times something fails, and what we learn from that is not to do it again. And that is just so wrong. How am I doing on time?
You have spent 35 minutes, or as you wish. You have
just 35 left?
No, well, feel free.
Okay, because I want to leave time for questions.
Yes, we can tell you when you have 1 hour and 10 if you want. We'll have minimum 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
Questions? Yes.
Okay. experience is understanding why it failed, not that it failed. Because most of the time, ideas are good. It's really rare that an idea is bad. You know, when you think about America, and I apologize for this because it's an American thing, but if you think about American football, a long time ago, there was just like 22 players. You know, now there's a kicking team, there's a receiving team, there's a team for 5 yards, a team for 10 yards. So back in the days when it was simple, every play on the board was designed to make a touchdown. The reality is very few of them made touchdowns. It wasn't a bad plan. They didn't say, let's not do this play again. So what happened? What happened is one of those 11 people failed. And that's okay, because that's going to happen. People will fail. People will make mistakes. So typically when something fails with us, in the early days, I never realized it was me. Because I didn't have the ability to get everybody on board with that idea. Or I didn't go back and find out what the problem was. You know, even in our facility, when we make a change, our Sundays are covered by surgery residents, and I wanted to move to having a senior surgeon on that day. Of course, all the other surgeons were against it because, pays and a bunch of stuff. So we put this doctor on, she's on 5 days, but she does surgery and sees appointments on Sunday. And so the rest of the surgeons come see it's not working. Here it is, 4 weeks later, 1 appointment, 2 appointments. This is when the doctor hack gets in the way. They look at the facts and not the big picture. Well, the big picture is this. A bunch of people in a building made a decision. That doesn't translate to the rest of the world knows we made that decision. It'll take months before the community out there understands that we have regular... we can send text messages, we can send emails, we do that. But you know what that's like. You guys get a million things in the mail, a million texts, you read some, you don't read some. Of course, now it's a year later, it's one of our busiest surgery days of the week. So learning from mistakes should never mean let's not do that again. Because even if you go through the process and you decide not to do it again, there are things that you will learn to ensure that the next plan, because why do plans fail? It's not the details. And what do we get caught up in as doctors in plans? The details. The plan fails because we don't have the right personnel, we don't have the right staff, we don't have the right passion, we don't have the right motivation to make the plan work. Because give me 5 great people, and I'll make every plan work. Give me 5 mediocre people, and I guarantee you that one of those plans will be successful, or at least marginally successful. Again, going back to how important people are, and again reminding you it's about how you motivate those people. The other thing that's important to learn is the difference between learning and a difference between insight. So learning, you'll forget most of what I told you today. But there might be a couple things I'll tell you to go, oh, wow, right. You study for your exam. I think you've all done that. We learned the material. If you then took the test 4 weeks later, we're not going to pass unless we study all over again. But when something happens to you, and you go, yeah, I get it, it's forever. And we get insights every day and blow them off. Example, true story. This woman still works for me. She's been working with us for 24 years. She's now in charge of purchasing for the entire network. 20 years ago, she was a receptionist, client service person, front desk. We had our first doctor's meeting. We're a medium-sized hospital at this point, and we're excited we had a doctor's meeting, but in retrospect, it was really a terrible meeting because we really talked about bad stuff. One of the things that came up is the receptionist forgot to ask for a urine sample in a dog that had a urinary problem. So I said, okay, I'll speak to her tomorrow, and we'll fix that. So the next day, I go, her name is Claudia. I said, Claudia, I said, we have to remember to ask every client that has a dog or cat with urine problems for urine sampling. Now, 27 years later, I realize there's a lot of reasons why that might have happened. Number one, the client might have just said that because they want to be embarrassed and didn't bring urine sample in, so I don't even know if it was true. So you don't realize those things when you're younger. So I went up and I said, you got to do that. She said to me, fine, Dr. DeCarlo, we'll try harder to ask that question all the time. Here's where the insight comes. As I walked away, she said, Dr. DeCarlo, and I said, what? She said, how do we do on the other 350 phone calls we took this week? I felt this big. So that's an insight. Now, it sounds pretty straightforward because I explained it to you, but you don't know how many times that happens in a day, in a week, in a month, that we don't take it that way. That sometimes we'll take, it doesn't matter, you can't make that mistake. So insights are important. So understanding that management has a really important role, understanding that insights cannot be left unrealized, and truly learning from mistakes. Because we made all of them. We didn't just walk into this building. Like I said, we started a 75 square meter building that was falling down. We were excited about it. We had passion for that building. It was my first job. And we were excited about our staff. You need to delegate, and it's a whole section for the next talk. And it really has to come from you. So, good leaders are not people who think from themselves out. Good leaders hire people that are going to be better than them. Good leaders do very little speaking at a meeting. Good leaders encourage input from everybody and listen. And again, I'm going to go back to what I asked you in the beginning of the lecture. If you can walk into all your meetings with such an open mind, you get rid of all the stuff, the taxes, the problems, the bad employees, and just go in and say, what am I going to get out of this? Because when you're in charge and you think you have the ideas, and you're very vested, or you're really determined with your ideas, what that does is it closes your ears. You're not willing to listen. And you don't know any more about how to treat a client at the front desk than the people who work there. And you need to listen. We all make the mistake. For some reason, we think when we get that doctorate degree, that we're suddenly smarter. Our knowledge base outside of veterinary medicine is no different than it was when we came in. And that's sad because our colleges don't pay attention to interpersonal relationships, which are really important. How we lead people, how we lead by example, how we lead by empowerment. If you spent as much time, I'm going to kind of close, must be close now. So I want to summarize by saying one thing. If you can put as much energy and passion and sincerity into your staff as you do with learning medicine and buying technology and figuring out how to get more money out of people, you will be successful in more than one way. For me, the most important way is you'll feel better about yourself, your staff will feel better about you, and together you'll treat your clients better. And you'll have a happier place. And I'd be very shocked if your business didn't start growing. We live in a world of multiple choices. We're catching up to you. And I kind of toured around Barcelona a little bit. There's veterinary practices all over the place. What are you going to give your client more than the next person? That only happens when you're sincere about it and you can take your mind, like you did when you walked into this room, and just be open to all the possibilities that your staff and yourself. You are very smart. You're doctors. Just remember, you can't use your doctor techniques to manage your business. And even the kinds of things that Perry teaches, that's not in your field of expertise. So you take that information, because you do need both. We talked about this yesterday. You need the Perrys of the world to help you have a solid machine running the company efficiently, and you understand where the expenses are, but you also have to invest immensely in your staff, which we will definitely go into more detail, either in the next lecture or the third one. So I think I've reached my time, and I promise to leave two things. Questions on anything, it doesn't have to be what we spoke about, but more importantly, people tell me that I look unapproachable when I'm walking around, and it's probably just because I'm daydreaming. So if you see me and you want to ask me a question, please feel free to come up to me. I'm not really an unfriendly person. I'm always thinking about something. So just saying that. So any questions about anything at all? Yes.
Jordi Jimeno